Welcome to a very special ITV News London and LBC debate.
We have a month to go until you decide London's next mayor. And we're live from Union Chapel in Islington on ITV, on LBC Radio and online for the next hour.
Tonight we will question the leading candidates on the main issues that matter to you. London's security, how to keep the capital safe from a terrorist attack. The housing crisis, which is seeing people priced out of their own city. And transport. Do you want fare freezers or new rail lines, or both?
And we'll test them with the views of our audience here tonight. On the panel, Sadiq Khan for Labour, Zac Goldsmith for the Conservatives, Caroline Pidgeon for the Liberal Democrats, Peter Whittle for UKIP, and Sian Berry for the Green Party.
You can join the debate online using the hashtag this evening, London Debate. Let's begin with discussing the terror threat. Sadiq Khan, if I can start with you, our poll out today for LBC and ITV News said that 80% of Londoners are worried about a terrorist attack coming 2 weeks after Brussels. Let's not think about how our emergency services would deal with that attack. How are we going to stop them? How would you do that if you were the Mayor of London?
Well, I understand the concerns expressed in your poll. Like many of the viewers and the people here, I lived through the trauma and pain of 7/7, which inflicted 52 deaths in London. We've got to make sure we return to neighbourhood police, and all the experts say the intelligence they get that relies upon us being safe comes from communities having confidence in neighbourhood police officers. That's been cut over the last few years. We've also lost 1,500 uniformed officers, and what we need is the public...
You're giving me the problems that we're facing right now, but how would you, as the new Mayor of London, come May the 6th, try to stop a terrorist attack?
But by the public having confidence in the police, they will provide the police with the intelligence that stops these attacks on a weekly and, I'm afraid, monthly basis.
What about people becoming radicalised in the first place? What would you do about that?
It's really important. If you look at London, Paris and Brussels, all those bombers were radicalised here in Europe. We've got to make sure we work with the government to close down internet services providers that are providing this messages of hate where people are radicalised in their bedrooms. We've got to promote positive British Muslim role models to make sure young people know it's possible to be British and Muslim. We need neighbourhood police officers to have the confidence of the community to come forward. We've also got to make sure, look, what's happening in Paris, what's happening in Brussels, what's happening in London, it's a small minority of Muslims saying they represent the entire faith. The vast, vast majority of Muslims are peaceful, law-abiding. We need to help them fight this extremism and terrorism.
Messages of hate. You had an aide that was working for you till a very short time ago who did messages of hate himself. He tweeted things about the Lee Rigby murder.
Sure, and he was sacked. Look, I've suffered...
Messages of hate. How are we going to stop the messages of hate, inciting people to become radicalised?
Sure. I've suffered extremism all my adult life. Standing for Parliament in 2005, extremists outside my mosque campaigned against me, saying I was going to hell because I was taking part in democracy. When I voted for same-sex marriage, there was a fatwa put out against me, and I need to advise my daughters about police protection because I voted for same-sex marriage. I've spoken about the importance of British Muslims standing up to this ideology. As soon as I discovered that my former parliamentary aide had these views, he was suspended straight away and he resigned the next day. There is no place in not just public life, but in British life for these sorts of views.
Zac Goldsmith, it's a terribly complex problem, but how do we begin to think about, when you are in that position of that power, protecting Londoners, stopping the next attack?
Keeping London safe is the first duty of the Mayor of London. It is an awesome responsibility, and the threat, as everyone knows, has escalated. We are a target. The emergency services stopped 7 serious incidents in the last 12 months. We are all in this room, and everyone watching this debate today, hopelessly indebted to our services. That is why at the heart of my action plan for London is keeping London safe, and that means working with this government, to ensure that our police have the resources they need, so we can keep police levels at 32,000, so we can guarantee neighbourhood policing in every single corner of London. That is a battle I've already fought with this government and have won. It means giving them the tools they need. So it's not just about money or numbers, it's about having the tools. It's about intelligence-led stop and search. It's about responding to the call by the Met Chief to enable a doubling of armed response officers, and it is about tackling online extremism. I have proposed, I'll be putting out a crime manifesto tomorrow, but I have proposed creating a body of 3,000 cyber specials, volunteers like the specials we have today, but cyber specials, working with Tech City to ensure that we have a team of people who are willing to give their time in service for London to help the police tackle a problem which has mushroomed out
And
of all
Zac,
control.
even without that crime manifesto, voters in London were seemingly backing you on security on this key issue of protecting. In our poll today, Sadiq has overtaken you. That must be worrying for you. That was the area, the one key issue you were beating this gentleman on.
Genuinely, I haven't seen your poll today, but I mean, if the polls were always right, we'd have a government run by Nicola Sturgeon and Ed Miliband today.
Okay,
so
point
I'm not going to
taken,
put too much
but
attention.
this
But look,
was the point that you were really strong on. Are you losing ground now?
And this is a point on which I remain very, very strong. The truth is that London depends almost entirely on central government for all of its powers and all of its fundings. Unlike places like New York, which generate huge wealth and hand half of it away to the federal government but hold on to half, London generates huge wealth for the country, hands almost all of it to the Chancellor, and the Mayor must then go cap in hand and beg for some of that money back. I have a record of working with this government, holding this government to account, but securing a good deal from this government. That is what's defined my role as a politician.
We'll come back to that relationship and all of your relationships with the Tory government in a little bit. Caroline Pidgeon, how do we protect the capital?
Well, firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Caroline Pidgeon. I'm a mother, a commuter, and I've been battling Boris's crackpot ideas for the last 8 years on the London Assembly. But the recent events we've seen in Brussels, they really affect all of us. It brings back memories of 7/7. I was working in one of the hospitals at the time on that day. And I think we have got to make sure the security of Londoners is put first. And when I talk to the counter-terrorism chief we have in London, he tells me the way that we keep communities safe is to make sure that we reverse the cuts of those safer neighbourhood teams that we've seen in recent years, put more police back on the streets and community support officers. But more than that, I'm the only candidate who's promising 3,000 additional police officers who will be on the tubes, the trains and our bus network to make sure Londoners are safe as they move around
Peter
the capital.
Whittle, you're shaking your head.
No, I am. I mean, I think we're hearing the same sort of thing from all candidates we've heard. Your original question was, how do we stop this? And the fact is, of course, we've had terrible domestic occurrences over the past 10 years in London. But it's different now. It's a different dimension. These people are travelling across Europe. They're using open borders across Europe. We know that from the Paris attack. We know that from the Brussels attack. It's a terrible thing to say, but unfortunately, an attack on London is inevitable. And the fact is that these people are using the cover, and they've made it quite clear. They're using the cover.
Peter
ISIS
Whittle,
made it
what
quite
about the homegrown terrorists?
Absolutely terrible, but they're completely. And of course, we should work absolutely to lessen that threat as much as possible. But you don't add to it, therefore. And the only reason, therefore, I'm saying this is that we can have this situation now simply because we are in the EU and we don't have control of our borders. We have to get control of our borders
Sian Berry,
to see who is coming in.
I think we all know that you can't put up a wall against terrorism, and you're quite right, the homegrown terrorists,
You can lessen
the
it.
extremism
You can
on the
lessen
ground,
it.
the best way to tackle that, and there's been a lot of talk about police numbers and keeping armed police on the streets. Actually, the strongest weapon that the Mayor of London has is leadership, building a stronger community, changing who the police are, having a more representative police force that is out there in the community, building stronger cooperation between the police and the community.
80% of Londoners are worried that one is going to happen right now. What's the short-term solution?
That's a worry I absolutely have as well. We all dread something like 7/7 happening again, and we do need the best possible emergency services right across the board. Our fire service and our ambulance service need to be at full capacity, working hard as well, if anything like that happens. But ultimately, we do need the strongest police force, the strongest intelligence-led policing, and cooperation within the community. And a strong,
But it's not enough.
united London.
It's not enough.
Point. I mean, look, we aren't more safe by having £600 million cut from the police budget over the last 6 years. We aren't more safe by losing 1,500 uniformed officers. We aren't more safe by losing 70%
we'll come back to where you need to
community
find the
officers.
money
We're going to recognise that.
to
really
put
important.
those policemen back on the street in a minute. We want to bring the audience in now, so if I can hand you over to Nick.
Nina, thank you. And this is the time to test some of the arguments. And remember, if you hear something you agree with, you can clap and cheer. If you hear something you don't agree with, we are in a church, but you could at least boo. Let's go to the first question. Forbes Twyman, you have a question about security. So what is it?
In light of the terrorist attacks in Belgium and Paris, what countermeasures are you prepared to make as the future Mayor of London.
OK, let's go to Zac Goldsmith. Countermeasures, perhaps this thing you were talking about, more cyber cops. Briefly explain what that is.
That's part of it. I want to work with Tech City. The tech sector has grown out of almost nothing. We dominate the world now in tech, and we have some brilliant and bright people.
How will that stop terrorism, Mr. Goldsmith?
It deals with one part of this, which is the growth, almost exponential growth of activity online, which is designed to recruit people into making bad decisions. We know that, and it's almost impossible for the police force, with its current numbers, to deal with that.
In a related issue, in the poll for LBC and ITV News London, I appreciate you've not had sight of it, but only 1 in 3 Londoners effectively has confidence in Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe. You've told me he's got another 3 years. Do you want to review that now?
No, I'm a fan of Bernard Hogan-Howe.
Why?
I've worked very closely with him as an MP for representing a London constituency. I have confidence in him. I think he is a man who puts the security of Londoners first. I like the fact that he's willing to stand up to politicians where necessary. I've seen him do it. He's been very, very forthright. I like the fact that he has the confidence of the people who work for him.
Well, he doesn't have the confidence of Londoners,
according
to the polls,
I suspect that's probably a temporary thing. Very few people have, unless you live in Zimbabwe, have continued 90% approval
Let's bring
ratings.
Sadiq Khan. Mr. Khan, you told me that you'd give him a year. He's effectively on probation. We're a European city. All of you agree we're under possible terror attack. What help is it? What hope is there of just giving a police chief 12-month probation?
Firstly, it's not me that's given him a year. It's the Home Secretary and the
you
Mayor
said
of
you would
London.
agree with that.
I said I agree with them that we should give him a year. But dealing with your question, there's 2 crucial things we've got to do. Firstly, when you speak to police experts, one of the ways we fight terrorism is the intelligence they receive from the community. We police by consent. If the public doesn't have confidence in the police, they won't come forward and report intelligence, which is very, very important.
Let's get this straight. You're not going to do the job, they're going to do the job.
And the second point, listen, it's not 32...
I thought you were the mayor.
But Nick, listen, we've got 32,000 police officers, 8.6 million Londoners.
Right.
They provide invaluable intelligence to the police service every day.
But the question was, what are you going to do? Not what's everyone watching this and in the hall are going to do. What are you, as a putative mayor, going to do?
Which is why the public having confidence in the police is so important. And the second thing is, on the first day of me being mayor, I spent a day in Dartford recently where there was all the emergency services had a unified response practice. God forbid if there was another terrorist incident. On day one, I'd have a major review, a root and branch of what the emergency services would do if, God forbid, there was another incident in London, as there was in Paris or in Brussels, to make sure we can respond.
I apologise to be rude.
I certainly believe from what he's saying that he wants us to be self-aware. So we're actually doing the police's job, not your job.
Yeah, can I just add,
Mr. Khan, we must bring the others in. Peter
Whittle.
Whittle.
Very, very important. I would say that basically, given the nature of this threat now, and given the randomness with which it can come, this is a totally new thing. It's not like the IRA in the 70s or anything like that. I would say we have to have many more armed policemen at tube stations and at places where the...
Sorry, you want to put more armed police?
Absolutely, I do.
OK, well, right, very quickly, a round of applause if you want to see more armed police on the streets. And very quickly, a round of applause if you do. If you think it would change the whole dynamic, a round of applause if you've had concern about more armed police on London Street.
Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Whittle, you've lost that one. Sian Berry.
We do have a counter-terrorism strategy at the moment. It's a counter-extremism strategy called Prevent. It isn't working. It's expecting people like police and lecturers in universities to be suspicious of their pupils and report them. And actually, we need a new strategy worked out with communities, with the people on the ground, like teachers, that actually works. We need to be doing what's most effective, not just what sounds tough.
Caroline Pidgeon, you're going to answer first the next question and feed in another responses if you like. Oromie Bidwell. Oromie, can we take your question, please?
Yes, I've got a very serious issue with neighbours smoking drugs and their drug fumes leaking into my flat below. It's been going on for 6 years. I now have a condition from the passive smoking, but I can't get any help in my borough from the police.
This is like more neighbourhood policing, Oromie? Is that what you're looking?
Well, neighbourhood policing and really the housing association have not done
we'll
anything.
stay with the policing aspect, but thank you, an important question. We might come back to you. Caroline?
Yeah, well, my answer for both of the questions is that we need to see more neighbourhood policing, and that also includes the community support officers. We've recently had a big campaign to save the community support officers, which are under threat. There is evidence that a lot of younger people in London have more confidence confidence talking to a community support officer than they do to a regular police officer. And in terms of picking up that intelligence and able to feed that in to tackle the terrorists and extremists, it's really important, but also to deal with the drug dealers. I was a counsellor for 12 years. I know only too well the impact it can have on individuals' lives if you have a drug dealer in your block as your neighbour. And it's absolutely what safer neighbourhood teams, the local police, should be dealing with. And that's why I would get more of them back dealing with those issues in the wards. And I would also do more than that. I would put 3,000 additional officers on the transport network in London.
Community policing, Sadiq Khan, how important is it? How would you get more officers doing it? The numbers have declined.
It's crucial. We've lost 70% over the last 6 years. Let me show you why it's important. Because if you have confidence in a police service, you know the local bobby, you'll come forward and report the family that's causing problems or the drug dealers on the estate. In your particular issue, what needs to happen is the tenancy agreement your neighbours have with the housing association or with the council as a term should have antisocial behaviour clauses. So if people are behaving in an antisocial manner, the local authority or the association should take action against that tenant. As far as neighbourhood policing is concerned, I go back to the question the gentleman asked over there.
Briefly, if you would, Mr. Khan.
We police by consent. The police officers have 32,000 eyes and ears. There are 8.6 million Londoners. If you see somebody buying lots of fertilisers, if you see somebody acting suspiciously, report it to the police.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Community policing, it's under a Conservative mayor that the numbers have declined, Mr. Goldsmith.
Boris Johnson made a pledge to increase police officer numbers to 32,000. He's done that. He kept that promise.
Not in the communities, though, not in
Stripped them
borough
out from the
policing,
wards
Mr.
and
Goldsmith.
safer neighbourhood teams.
If you remember, just a few months ago, there was a threat, a really significant threat to the police budget. About £1 billion was going to be taken out of the budget. I took a stand on that issue, along with my colleagues. Well, you can laugh, but it's a fact. I took a stand along with my colleagues in London, including Boris Johnson. We knocked on the door of the Home Secretary and the Chancellor. We won the debate. That budget is now ring-fenced and protected. I agree, however, with Caroline that we need more police on public transport. That is a commitment I have made.
And finally, and you each have one sentence, and this is a very, very simple answer. Stop and search. More of it, less of it. How should it be done? Sadiq Khan, in a sentence.
Intelligence-led stop and search is good and invaluable.
Thank you for the sentence, Mr. Goldsmith.
Intelligence-led stop and search. Need more of it.
Need more of it. OK. Caroline
I
Pidgeon.
think it should be done in the right way as long as it has got intelligence in it.
So we've got the same, all basically saying the same. Peter Whittle.
Intelligence-led, but there's no question it saves lives. So yes, stop and search is
And
important.
Sian Berry.
Targeted, and exactly the same thing goes for surveillance as well. Can I say something about the antisocial behaviour, though,
sentence,
as well?
if you would, Sian
Because I'm a
Berry.
councillor in Camden as well, and it's the cuts to local government mean that you can't have the working you used to get between the community support officers, the social workers, the community safety officers, that will solve a case like that. We have that problem right across where I'm
OK,
a
thank you for
councillor in
respecting that.
Camden.
Many more issues to discuss. Nina.
Nick, thank you. Next, how do you solve a problem like a housing crisis? All you guys have promised Londoners thousands more homes over the next year, over the next 4 years, over the next 10 years. I want to know how you're going to actually achieve that aim. Boris failed, Ken had targets, Boris didn't. Zac, how are you going to actually solve what has become the biggest issue for Londoners and their families?
So, the word crisis is often used in politics. It's an exaggeration usually in relation to housing. It is not an exaggeration. We do have a housing crisis. You could be earning a decent salary in London now, well over the average, which is around £34,000, and you can't get the keys to your first home. You have
We
been
know
priced
this.
up.
We know
so
this.
We need to
How are you
increase
going to
supply.
solve it?
We need to increase supply. We need around 50,000 homes a year to begin to close
We know
the gap.
the numbers.
So
How
the
are you
question is,
going
how
to
do you
build
do
the
that?
new houses?
You do that with two principal things. You get a deal with government whereby the government releases huge areas of brownfield land which is owned by the public sector, Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Justice, NHS.
How are you going to convince the government, albeit a Tory government, to sell that land to London as opposed to the highest bidder?
The government is there to be convinced. The government recognises we have a housing crisis. I put myself forward in this race as someone who can get a good deal from government. I have absolute confidence that I will do that deal with government. But once we have that land, it's not just good enough to transfer ownership. You need to grow the transport network in order to unlock that land. So Crossrail 2, for example, is not just about keeping London connected. It will enable us to build nearly 200,000 homes. The Sutton Tramlink extension will enable us to build 20,000 homes that would otherwise not be built. The overground extension to Barking Riverside, 26,000 homes that otherwise wouldn't be built. That's why protecting the transport budget and growing the transport network is key to unlocking that land and solving the housing crisis and ensuring that those homes are built properly, well, in such a way that enhances communities and that Londoners have the first options on them. That is
Sadiq, you look
essential.
exasperated. How are you going to do it?
We've had 8 years of this. Look,
Think of any years of this.
think of Hyde Park. the Mayor of London, Transport of London, we own land equivalent to 16 times Hyde Park. Transport for London owns that much land. It's public land that we own. I wouldn't have a fire sale like these guys want to have. I'd use that public land to build genuinely affordable homes for Londoners. It's not simply the numbers of homes, it's the right sorts of homes. That means no more selling off-plan overseas to investors in the Middle East and Asia. Nothing against foreigners. Some of my best friends and family are foreigners. We need homes for Londoners. That means homes that are genuinely affordable for a social rent, a council rent, homes where you pay a London living rent, 1/3 of average earnings, and homes which are part buy and part rent, shared ownership, with a deposit of £5,200, zones 3 to 6, and a monthly rent of £400 a month. It's the right sorts of homes being built.
How do you fix those rents, Sadiq? How do you control those rents?
I'll tell you why, because it's public land. We can decide what sort of homes are built on the public land, but also have a London plan which says to local authorities and developers the condition of you getting permission to build lands on private land is at least half should be genuinely affordable. And by the way, as a condition, first dibs for Londoners. No more selling off land.
What is in it for the developers? Why should they?
We are the developers.
Why should they go for something that, in terms of affordable homes, might not make them a profit?
We own the land. We own the land. We will make sure on that public land the right sorts of homes are
But you're not putting
There's no
any
reason
money
at all.
in. You're not putting any money in.
It's quite clear. It's
quite clear. So I go around London, I'm talking to young people. They feel they're going to have to move out of London to be able to even afford to rent privately, let alone to be able to buy their first home. And the issue is, it's all right what we hear from these guys, but none of them are looking at putting money in. So Liberal Democrats have a very clear plan that we will ask Londoners to keep paying the £20 they've been paying for the Olympic Games to pay for a big housing and Olympic effort to build the homes we need for Londoners.
Do you think that's something that Londoners want to do, given everyone accepts there's a housing crisis, but they're struggling to pay their rent
I think they will.
and make a deposit and pay their mortgage?
When I talk to Londoners, they absolutely do, because it's, you know, for a few pennies a week to be able to build the homes we need. But it's more than just that. I would set up a building company at City Hall to drive this through. We've relied on the private sector for too long. And then on top of that, I would make sure we set up a state-of-the-art construction academy to train the workforce. I've been at a construction academy today, seeing the young people, the apprentices, doing the bricklaying. We need to make sure we train up the workforce.
Peter Whittle, Ken Livingstone, Boris Johnson failed. What would UKIP do?
The fact of the matter is, you know, we've had this campaign for a long time now, right? And the two top issues for Londoners is housing and immigration, right? Those two things are linked, right? There are 1 million people a decade now are coming into London. By the year 2050, they're saying we might have a population of about 13.5. None of these people have actually even mentioned this. They talk about what they're going to do. I will ask you now, do you think that London is not overcrowded?
I think that the Mayor of London has no authority over immigration policy. If you're standing on
Absolutely. The fact is,
Peter, if you're standing on an immigration platform, then you're standing in the wrong race.
No. The Mayor has influence of a very, very unique kind, right? And therefore, if the concern of Londoners is immigration and housing, he has to put that not only to government, but he has to say, actually...
We've got a housing crisis right now, not even talking about anybody new entering the city. What would you do, very briefly?
What would I do about...
The housing crisis, the fact that right now people cannot get on the housing ladder. Doctors are leaving the city because they cannot afford to live here.
Yes,
Sian Berry.
exactly. We've got brownfield sites which we could develop and definitely would do that. I believe in social housing. We have to have a golden age of social housing so that people feel stable and that they can pay affordable rents. I think social housing is a great thing. But the fact of the matter is, none of these guys, because they just are frightened of talking about it, will actually... Yes, you are frightened of talking about immigration.
He doesn't have a housing policy, he has an immigration policy there.
No. It's actually it's the same. It is actually the same thing. If you are really saying that immigration, uncontrolled migration, is not linked to the housing crisis, then you are in denial.
I think the housing crisis. I mean, we have an affordability crisis in the housing market at the moment. We have a lot of profiteering going on, and none of the other candidates have really said what they'll do to build new homes outside of the market. We've had 16 years of mayors trying to get more affordable homes from the very big developers, and we need to be pioneering with our public land a new market where people are paying for the bricks and mortar, not necessarily the land. People want a secure home for the rest of their lives. They don't necessarily want an investment that's going to triple in price in a short period.
Have we got to accept that the capital city has got to be
here.
a home for people who just rent? Have we got to accept that this is the way forward, like other European cities?
People who are renting, many of them are trying very hard to save up for a deposit for a new home. And we have to do something about the 3.5 million homes we already have that are unaffordable and the 2.3 million renters who can't afford to live here. We need the power for rent controls. I think I'm the only mayor who's actually going to be campaigning hard enough with the government to get us the powers to control our rents. I want to work with the mayors from other cities across the UK, get us the power to stop rents rising quite so fast. Let our wages catch up. Then we might...
Sian Berry, we've got to just pause there for a minute. Before we take questions from the audience, I'm afraid our time is up on ITV. The debate continues in a few minutes on LBC and online, but we leave our TV viewers with a full list of candidates standing for mayor on May the 5th, followed by a full weather forecast.
And let's go straight to those questions now, and to prove that I'm listening to everything you are saying, can we go off script? There's a young lady here in a white T-shirt and a blue denim jacket, and as Zac Goldsmith was talking, I clearly heard you say rubbish at least twice.
Sorry.
What was No, don't say sorry, that's what we want, this is the debate.
Well,
What was rubbish that Mr Goldsmith was saying?
It's unrealistic. What's
what
he
way?
saying? Let's go push everyone out of London. My children grew up in London. I had to leave my job as a teacher to fight for a really long-winded, again through cuts, long-winded diagnosis for 2 autistic children, lost my house that I owned, ended up renting, can't afford the rent. Oh, but local housing allowance deems that what I'm renting for is way over and above and too expensive. So I'm in a situation where I'm thinking constantly about, do we leave London?
All right.
And where do my children go? They're in autistic special
to
schools.
assess the other candidate. Could I have a first name? You don't have
Alison.
Alison.
Yeah.
Alison, thank you. How do you respond?
First of all, I'm really sorry to hear what's happened to you, and you will not be surprised to know that that is a story that is told throughout London. People are being priced out because prices have got
But
too
how
high.
are you going to keep us in? You've got key workers leaving.
The first thing you have to do, which we've already talked about, but is increasing supply. I've told you how I will increase supply. I don't think it's about capital. I think that, I've talked to the G16, the big housing associations. I asked them, what do we need to do to get you to increase supply? Is it capital? Is it money? They said no. The biggest obstacle for them is lack of access to land. If you do a deal with them,
people are
give them
building all over
land.
London. I live in North London, in a very affluent area, and they are building constantly. But none of the new builds are going to social housing. They are being sold off privately, very expensively. Who's capping that? Who's actually looking after the people?
By the way, if you agree with what Alison's saying, give her a round of applause. I sense there's a lot. Alison, I have to ask you, do you sense that Mr Khan had better ideas, or is the same sort of criticism there?
Nick,
to be fair, for the Green Party, lady, sorry, I can't remember your name. Lady Khan,
okay.
Green Party had a little bit more
let's give Sean an
savvy
opportunity.
with
Final sentence.
capping housing.
I just want to make the point that the housing associations have committed, if they do a deal with land, to replacing every home sold with 2.
But it's not.
They've made that commitment.
Can I just say, it's not.
I am committed.
No.
Just one
It's
more
not the
answer.
housing associations that are the problem. It's the people that are selling land off to private developers, and they're being allowed to.
But I'm talking about publicly owned land which we control. If I'm elected mayor, I will control that land. I will decide what happens.
The Tories are killing
I will
off
come to you.
social
I must say,
housing.
Sadiq, Alison, I will
And
hold you.
ensure that new homes on public
Much
land
of
are
what has
for
annoyed
London.
Alison also plays into what you say, Sadiq Khan.
Alison, firstly, I agree with everything you've said in relation to the problem. Some of the solutions are to make sure that we have the right sorts of home built in London, that we stop them being sold off-plan overseas to investors. We've got to make sure the homes are genuinely affordable, though. That means a social rent, but also a new thing called a London living rent. A third of average earnings is what a London living rent will be. Well, I'll tell you why. Because rather than you paying a market value, which could be an average £1,600 a month, you'll pay a third of average local earnings, plus also shared ownership. Shared ownership is part buy and part rent.
That's all fine and well if you're working now. I'm in a situation I had to leave a very good profession as a teacher to care for my children. I no longer can afford housing.
Actually going to assist Alison's case. You are next, Mr Whittle. Respect, if you would. Final sentence, Mr Khan. You're doing all right at the moment, don't you worry, Sean? You're doing a moment.
Nick, to be fair, look, so the
I'd
genuinely
enjoy the moment if I were you.
The genuinely affordable is a combination of social rent, council properties, London living rent, or shared ownership. It's really important. But also, we've got to fix the rental market. I will set up a not-for-profit letting agency across London, so you can come to me and get a.
I still think I can see Alison in my corner. Alison, I'm going to have to just stop you from Peter Whittle. I will come to you, Caroline.
Just to say that you're one of about 600,000 people who've left in a decade, right? And I don't want Londoners, and I mean all Londoners, to leave London. And so what our policy is, for example, when it comes to social housing, is to make sure that they go to Londoners first, and we say that that is to have been in the borough for about 5 years, which I think is a very reasonable amount, given it's a modern city and a transitory
So that will just
city.
lead to more homeless Polish and Romanians?
No, I'm thinking of London.
Well, obviously
I'm thinking of Londoners like the lady here. I'm thinking of London. When it comes to GLA land, too, the same thing. People who've lived in that borough for 5 years should have first priority for that, because that way people don't have to move out of London and probably end up paying huge fares to work back in London.
OK, Caroline Pidgeon, I was interested when you were talking with Nina earlier. You're actually going to keep taxes up?
I'm going to
and you expect people to vote for you?
I'm going to keep council tax at last year's levels to make sure that we can build the housing. But the crucial issue here is that the Tories are trying to kill off social housing as we know it, and Labour were no better when they were in government. They didn't allow councils to build council housing. I believe in council housing. None of this affordable, which doesn't mean what it means in the dictionary. Genuinely affordable housing for Londoners. So 1 in 4 of the homes I will build will be council housing. And I think it's really, really important that we do that. And it will be, the 50,000 council homes I plan to build will be 10 times more than Boris Johnson has built in the last year. It's really important that we transform housing in London. The people I've met at homeless hostels in London, exactly the situation you've been in. They've lost their home, they've had other issues come up. We need to help everyone in London. That includes people like yourself who've become homeless as a result of no fault of their own.
Caroline, thank you. Sian, let's hear more of your plan, because it did get some...
I mean, that is entirely true, that we have not been building council homes. We've also been demolishing council homes right across London. Darren Johnson, our Green Assembly member, exposed how 8,000 council homes are lost in so-called regeneration projects. And these are projects planned by Lib Dem councils, Labour councils and Conservative councils across London. We have to be building more, but we also want not to be demolishing what we've already got. I'm a private renter myself. I know exactly what you mean about wondering how long you can stay in the city for. I earned an average salary. I was paying more than half my salary in rent, and that is the average now across London. We have to do something about the people who are already living in the homes we already have, not just worry too much solely about the new homes that we build. We can do a lot with those.
I want to get one more question. I must get Sian, thank you. Let's find Hannah Mooney. Hannah, hello, Hannah, your question.
So I'm a community nurse living in London. I work and live in the same borough. I pay more than half of my wages on rent and bills and council tax, and essentially I will have to move out of the borough. How are you going to get my vote? Why should I vote for you?
Are you a first-time buyer, I'm guessing?
Saving.
Of course, no, I said, but I mean, it's a mammoth hill to climb, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mr. Goldsmith, you've been quiet for a while. Let's come back to you.
Thank you. 2 things. The first is to recognise that there are 2 million renters in London. A very large number of those people are dependent upon rogue landlords who make their life very difficult. Insecure tenancies, bad conditions, and an unreliable service. There is a housing bill going through Parliament at the moment which has a chapter on dealing with rogue landlords, and it does shift the balance. It's not law yet, it's about to be. It shifts the balance now. So for the first time...
She wants to buy, remember, Mr. Goldsmith.
I'm going to answer that one. I'll be very quick on this. So it allows for the first time local authorities to impose big spot fines on landlords, to bar them from being landlords and to require them to pay back rent going back months. This is new. It's a big step in the right direction.
How will that help?
I said 2 things. I said 2 things. And the second thing is to increase supply. And I think what Manchester is doing now is a model that we need for the whole of London. They have created an investment fund designed to attract investment by pension funds and others, including overseas institutional investors. They've had no problem getting the capital they need, and they're using the money to build large-scale professional rental opportunities on public land. I want to roll that out across the whole of London so that we massively increase the options for people who have no option today but to rent.
Sadiq Khan, how would you help Hannah?
There's 2 key things. One is you need to be paying less rent so you can save more money for a deposit. The average deposit in London is now £108,000 to buy a property, average. So the London living rent that I talked about, the reason why it's a third of average earnings, it gives you a chance to put money aside for a deposit. That's part 1 of the equation.
How will you keep rents down?
Part 2...
how will you freeze rents?
By building genuinely affordable homes on public land. Think about Hyde Park, Nick.
Right.
16 times Hyde Park is the amount of land we own. Second thing is we need to build genuinely affordable homes for you to buy. We've modelled land that will be released by TfL in zones 3 to 6. In zones 3 to 6, we can build genuinely affordable homes to buy, where your deposit is on average £5,200. Hopefully you're able to save for that deposit £5,200.
But then a longer commute, Mr. Khan.
But this is zones 3 to 6, and the part rent element is £400, and the part will be mortgaged. That way, you can afford to have a mortgage.
But that means they're living away from perhaps the borough in which they want to live. They're right out in the boondocks.
Which zone do you live in? Where do you live?
Hillingdon.
Hillingdon. Well, there you go. You're already in zone. You're already in an outer London zone, and that's really important.
So you can stay there then.
We build genuinely.
You're out there, so you stay there.
Genuinely affordable homes that you can afford to live in. It's not simply a case of building more units of property, because they're bought by foreign investors.
But they would say that keeps the price down. Builders would say that's what helps keep them price. I know it sounds ludicrous, but that's what they would say.
Clearly not.
Last word. Can I just... Maybe with Nina. No, please, respect the last word. Hannah, what you hear?
But what also concerns me is people keep buying these properties and then renting them out.
Okay, that's something that we have. Thank you very much. More questions in a moment. Nina.
Nick, thank you. Right now, your next concerns are about public transport. Is it a simple choice between fares hike or fares freeze, or is it far more complicated than that? Peter Whittle, how would you improve the daily commute?
Well, I think that the daily commute, last year on the Tube had 18 of its most crowded days in its history, which is something like 100 years, over 100 years old. The fact is that the strain that the uncontrolled migration has had into our city, you can laugh. I don't see why you laugh.
What is your policy on improving public transport? We have clearly got your views on immigration. I think everyone in the audience, all of the listeners on LBC are quite clear. What is your policy on improving public transport?
That is the basic problem that has to be dealt with. But on top of that, I would say that we do not need vanity projects that come under the kind of transport sphere. We do not need garden bridges. We don't need cable cars. We don't need any of this stuff. What we do need is proper infrastructure investment in this system. So what I would do is campaign against HS2.
Peter Whittle, thank you. Are we going to get that investment if there's a brilliant incentive to vote for you, a fares freeze? How do you marry the two? How does that work?
Well, we need a modern and affordable transport system. Fares have gone through the roof over the last 8 years. We pay the most expensive fares in all of Europe.
You're going to freeze them. How are you going to pay for that without making sure the Tube gets the investment it so desperately needs?
Okay. I was trying to answer that, Nina. So the TfL budget every year is £12 billion a year. TfL is good, but it's flabby. I asked an FOI question, free of information. The amount of money TfL spends on temporary agency staff has doubled in the last 8 years. They spent £383 million on consultants and agency staff last year. They lost £61 million on fare evasion last year. Why aren't we being more efficient? Transport for London, there are 18 separate buses, companies that run our buses in London, 18.
Sadiq Khan, so you're going to cut the budget from TfL? Fine. How much is the fare freeze going to cost Londoners? How much? Because TfL are saying £1.9 billion, and you disagree quite considerably with that figure. How much is it going to cost you to deliver this promise of a fares freeze for 4 years for Londoners?
Well, the TfL Commission was on the excellent Nick Ferrari show recently and agreed that my £450 million is deliverable in relation to the fare cut. He also
I think they might dispute that. They're not here to back me up on that one. How much is it going to cost if it's not £1.9 billion?
It's £450 million.
450. Why such a difference between those figures?
And Mike Brown also said it will have no impact on investment. Look, my plans are to make TfL more efficient, to cut down on waste, but also to increase the revenue streams of TfL. 40% of the companies who run our buses are owned by the governments of France, Germany and Holland. The fares we pay go towards reducing the fares, guess where? France, Germany and Holland. Why isn't TfL bidding for those contracts to run the buses in London?
Zac Goldsmith.
Thank you. Nick might need to get Mike Brown back on the show, because that's not at all what he said. It's more or less the opposite of what he said. That we are 4 weeks away from an election, and I need to persuade more than half of Londoners to give me their backing. There's nothing I'd like more than to offer a brash,
And are you going
make
to
a
put
brash
the
promise
fares up? He's freezing them. Are you going to? He's saying you're going to put them at 17%.
That's back of the fag packet stuff. But
17%.
How much then? If you're not going to put them at 17%?
There is nothing I'd like more than to make a brash promise. But I know that we need to protect the transport budget, and I know there isn't an expert in the world.
What will that mean for tube fares, for bus fares, for train fares? What will it mean? Londoners want to know what that means.
There is not an expert in the country, including Labour experts, who believe you can take £1.9 billion out of the budget and grow the network.
What does it mean for fares? Will they go up by 17%?
I'm telling you that my priority, this is back of the fag packet stuff, 17%.
Will they go up under your reign?
My absolute commitment, my starting point, is to protect the transport budget. If I don't do that, our trains will stop running. London will come to a standstill. That means missing yet again the last train home because of signal failure.
Could you lose this entire campaign on this key issue of fares
Voters
freeze?
understand. London is made up of intelligent people who understand that the fares pledge that we've heard from Sadiq Khan is total, utter nonsense. There is not a single expert in the country who believes it's deliverable.
17%.
Not one person.
Caroline.
Imagine you're a nurse or a cleaner or a caretaker, and you travel in at the crack of dawn to get to your place of work, and you spend your first few hours just working to pay for the transport. And that's why I've got costed plans, none of this nonsense which doesn't stack up. Costed plans.
Could he do it for 450 million?
No, he couldn't. Absolutely not. I spent 8 years looking at the transport books at City Hall. Absolutely not. But what's quite clear is that if you bring in half-price fares by 7:30 in the morning, for those people who travel in early, and also if you're prepared to get up earlier in the morning, you'll get half-price fares as well. That will really help, particularly low-income Londoners.
And how is that costed, Caroline Pidgeon?
Of course, it's going to cost £30 million, and I'd pay for that by scrapping projects such as the Silvertown Tunnel in East London and the Garden Bridge, so very clearly. But I also would help bus passengers. A 1-hour bus ticket to allow passengers to click in as many times as they like with their card, and they'd only pay one fare. And to be honest, you know, lots of other people are trying to copy that idea.
You want something similar to that? Would you not bring that?
I think you'll find on Wikipedia.
You don't have to pay every time you swap buses.
I'm going to look for every opportunity to bear down on cost to find inefficiencies.
And are you going to learn the tube map? Because you came a little unstuck earlier, didn't you? Not knowing the stations on the central line.
Look, I use 2 lines very, very regularly. I know those lines inside out. There are plenty of tube lines you could test me on, and I wouldn't know the answer. That's what City Map is for, and I rely very heavily on it. But I know that if we do not invest in growing the transport, it's not only about keeping London moving, it's about housing. We've just been talking about housing. If you don't grow the network,
I've got to bring Sian Berry, Green Party.
It is an undeliverable
Yes, I mean,
policy.
I have a great policy for fares. Neither of the candidates over here have a coherent policy. Sadiq Khan's arguments are those of, weirdly, austerity and cuts and George Osborne. I don't think that's a good way to treat public services. We know what happens when you do that. Zac has nothing to offer people who are paying more and more every year for their fares. My plan would be to reduce fares for people in outer London, bring them down to the fares that people in the centre pay, so that everyone's journey to work costs the same. And I'm not scared to say that I will pay for that by increasing charges for driving in London, because drivers in London have a huge impact on the city. They only contribute 2.5% towards Transport for London's budget. Fare payers putting in 40% of the budget at the moment, and I want to rebalance that a little bit. My plans add up. They're fairer to everybody in outer London.
You can't keep penalising drivers. You cannot keep penalising drivers.
Let's widen this out to the audience then.
Nina, thank you. Well, we've been doing some checking, Mr. Khan. While you're absolutely right that my programme is excellent, I have to say that Mr. Goldsmith is right. Mike Brown, the TfL Commissioner, has expressed concern and caution about your sums.
I will put my website after this programme finishes the exact quote from Mike Brown, where he says, "My plans are deliverable and no impact on investment."
I don't think that was in my show, but thank you. We come to questions on this issue. So, Penelope Evans, you will have a chance, panel. Penelope Evans. Penelope.
My question is to do with actually driving in London. You stated that it's only 2%. but we're paying a lot of money because some of us have businesses that we need a vehicle. What are you going to do without penalising us drivers to actually improve the roads, to make it that you can actually drive through London without having to go around, and make it more affordable, that small businesses can actually progress forward?
Are you a small business, may I ask?
I am, yes.
What sort of line are you in, Penelope?
I'm in food.
In food, so you need a van, I imagine, or something to move
I need
things
to
around.
feed people.
Yeah.
I do that.
Well, what you can't. Well, as long as you're watching online, if you're listening on LBC, I have to tell you that Penelope's eyes were locked on the Green Party, Sian Berry, through all of that. So, Sian Berry, coming to you first for the Greens.
The key thing is we do need to be reducing congestion precisely because there are a lot of vital journeys that need to be made on streets that are, at the moment, completely clogged up. So what we do need is something smart, something that rewards drivers for driving outside of rush hour, a new congestion charge, and actually the Federation of Small Businesses and London First, the business group, the Institute of Civil Engineers, the Royal Town Planning Institute, they've all said that London needs to replace the current congestion charge with something that's less of a blunt instrument, that doesn't just give you like one charge for going in just once in the course of a day, that only charges you for how far you drive, but actually is effective in reducing traffic.
But if she's got to go and get her loaves or cooking oil or I don't know, whatever you get, your tomatoes, I've no idea, your chicken, I've no idea what you make. How's that going to help you charge your charge
The main
more?
cost to a business is being stuck in congestion, the time it wastes when you're stuck in congested road.
How are you going to then get produce? How are you going to actually then deliver things? If yes, you are stuck in traffic and then you're going to penalise people. But how are you going to do that? How are you going to improve it?
What about the plumber with his van? Or the builder with his or her van? Or whatever it might be? How are they going to move it? And poor old Penelope with her van.
Clogged up. That's the whole point.
The problem is that there's no point really, Sean, because if you are sort of basically an anti-business sort of party, you're not really going to look upon anything.
Are you an anti-business
party? No, you. I'm saying the Greens, basically anti-economic growth and all the rest of it. You're not going to be that business friendly. Let's face it.
The Federation of Small Businesses rated my policies first in 2008 when I last stood for mayor because I am in tune with small businesses. We want a more diverse economy and more small businesses in London.
What we don't need is more congestion.
The Federation of Small Businesses wants a smarter congestion charge system. It recognises the current system is broken.
You're talking about congestion. The lady is talking about the congestion, right? And the fact is the congestion at the moment is out of control in London for one very good reason, and that is huge amounts of licences are being given out to private hire vehicles. Do you know that basically 1 in 10...
Mr Whittle, how would you combat that?
Well, we would push for a freeze, right, a temporary freeze.
You're powerless.
No,
you're
not powerless to do that.
Parliament. We've discussed this before.
No, you're not powerless. It does require primary legislation, but the fact is, from an administrative point of view, you can slow the process down. And why we would do that in the meantime, we would actually charge double congestion charge for those drivers.
Let's bring Mr Goldsmith. Penelope, back to you in a second. No, I'll get you in a second. I want to bring Mr Goldsmith. Mr Goldsmith, you may of course be a blue as a Conservative Party member, but you're very green as well. And it's on Boris Johnson's watch that many would say the city has been transformed more than the Luftwaffe, the way it's been dug up. How would you respond?
Wow, that's quite a thing to say. Look, first of all, I don't think anyone drives in London now for fun. It is a nightmare driving in London, as you will know, as a small business.
But they do for business,
Mr. So I don't believe it is right to reach out for a policy that punishes people for decisions they can't avoid making. I don't believe you have an alternative, therefore to punish you with more taxes, to me, doesn't seem to be fair. We have an air pollution problem and we have a congestion problem, and I think we have the answers without lumbering more taxes on small businesses. We can clean up our buses, our cabs, our private hire vehicles very, very quickly with existing technology in existing budgets in the first time.
How do you clean up a cab, Mr Goldsmith?
Every new black cab from 2018 is going to be electric in any case. Existing cabs can be retrofitted with...
Who pays for the retrofitting?
The retrofitting is cost effective. It pays for itself in 2 years.
Who pays? So the driver pays?
I will be putting forward proposals in the next 3 days showing how a loan fund will be created for black cabs are effectively
Well, you can tell us
businesses.
now if you like.
I more or less have just told you. I've grown my
so
own
I'm a taxi driver. I get a loan, do I, to do this?
You will have the loan that's required to retrofit your cab. The money will
but I still have to pay it back.
The money will come back through savings in 2 years. It's a very effective thing to do.
And every taxi driver, how old will these taxis be?
My commitment is that black cab drivers will not have to pay a penny.
All right.
I know, but in the meantime...
Hold on, Mr Whittle.
It's not just about black cabs, it's about private hire vehicles, it's about our buses, and it's about private cars. And we have the technology now to foster a very rapid shift to electric and zero-emission replacement cars, and to deal with congestion. We can get trucks off our road. I visited a haulage firm 2 weeks ago, one of the biggest in the capital, and they have reduced the number of trucks they put on the road by 70%.
I must get others in, Mr. Whittle.
Yeah, just one point on that. The fact is, Zach, there won't be a black cab industry in a few years to convert in that way unless we really help.
And that's a sentence. Caroline Pidgeon in a moment. Sadiq Khan, Labour.
What I won't do is increase the amount you pay for congestion charge, nor will I widen the area of the congestion charge. It's really important. One of the reasons why congestion is caused is utility companies and others digging up our roads and no work being done, and those being left where roadworks are taking place cause new congestion. We've got to make sure the Mayor is working much better with the permit system. So if somebody wants to dig up our roads, everyone does it at the same time, but we charge them so they can't spend days and days and days with you being disrupted by roadworks taking place. We've also got to learn the lessons from the huge problems caused by the first generation of superhighways, cycle superhighways, causing huge problems in parts of London. To make sure...
How would you stop that? Because roadworks are going to cause problems, Mr.
Because what we've got to make sure is we learn... So, for example, you don't necessarily have to have the lanes as wide as we do. You don't necessarily spend as much money as you've currently spent on superhighways 1. You don't need to have permanent obstructions in the road. We've got to learn the lessons to make sure cars flow smoother.
We must bring Lib Dem's Caroline Pidgeon. Yeah, you're a cycle lane fan, I understand.
I am indeed, but I mean...
Would you do more?
Yes, I absolutely would do more, but I think perhaps some of the I think we've over-engineered like we do so much in the UK. But what I think is really important, there can't be anyone who's listening or watching this who hasn't sat and wasted so much time in congestion and gridlock in London. And that's why we've got to tackle congestion for buses and taxis to get around, and also the light goods vehicles and so on. I would ban HGVs at rush hour. That will make it safer for pedestrians and cyclists and improve the environment. I would make sure that we have consolidation centres so we can make sure that we minimise the number of vehicles on the roads, and we're able to also use the Thames to bring goods along. You can absolutely, and we need to review the hours of the lorry ban. But what's really important is that we actually...
But that's just lots of vans. A great big barge comes up the Thames and then lots of little vans.
What's really important is that we tackle congestion properly, and that means I think we have got to increase it at peak hours in the morning. We've got to get those private vehicles off the road that don't need to be there, and I think that's what we have to do. I also think there are some people, because at Canary Wharf and places they get free parking, they drive to work. We need to spring in a workplace parking levy to tackle that as well. So small businesses are able to get around, as well as the buses and the taxis.
Caroline Pidgeon, thank you. Nina?
OK, let's return to our poll, the joint poll between ITV News and LBC. It gave Sadiq Khan a 10-point lead, a 4-point increase on last month. Sadiq Khan, this is yours to lose. You're like Leicester, aren't you?
I'd be called a lot worse. There's no complacency. We learned last year during the general elections how wrong the pollsters can get it. The only poll that really matters is the poll on May the 5th. I'm working my socks off to persuade Londoners to lend me their vote on May the 5th so I can fix the housing crisis. I can make our transport modern and affordable, support businesses to grow and expand, make our city healthier and safer.
And your manifesto is available to read online. If you get in, we will see a Labour mayor with a Tory government. For the first time, we've not had this combination. We've had 16 years of Boris and Ken. How will you work with the likes of David Cameron, with George Osborne?
Well, we've had an independent mayor and a Labour government. We've had a Tory mayor and a Labour government.
We haven't had Labour and Tory.
But the point is, look, this government works with a Scottish Parliament, a Scottish government, that's SNP, with a Welsh government, that's Labour, with Greater Manchester, which is Labour. The government recognises the importance of London to our great country. I'll be a mayor for all Londoners. I'll be your champion and your fighter.
What's
that's
your
really
relationship
important.
with the Prime Minister right now?
I've not spoken to him recently. He's been busy, hopefully, saving the jobs created by the loss of the Tata Steel. But, you know, get on well with most members of the government.
Could you call him on the phone? Presumably Zac could and does.
You'll find the Mayor of London can call many people on the phone, including David Cameron.
And who are you calling, Zac, to save your campaign? Because at the moment, his increase is increasing.
You can't be governed by polls, as we saw at the last election. I know I've got a big challenge. 29 days, I've got to use every second of every minute of every hour to speak to as many people as I possibly can about my action plan for London and persuade them not only that it's the right plan, but that I can deliver it. And I can deliver it by working with this government. And that is crucial. You put your finger on the button a few moments ago.
Boris's shoes, whatever your politics in this room, to the listeners listening, they are big shoes to fill. A great character. During the Olympics, a massive ambassador. One of the people talking about his legacy, Kit Malthouse, said, Boris gave this city its confidence back.
Yeah.
Zac, can you do that?
I absolutely can, but I'm not going to pretend to be Boris Mark II. I don't think any candidate would be. I don't think any figure in politics, Labour, left, right, centre, would pretend they're Boris Mark II. He's unique in British politics, and he's been a great mayor, and he was the right man for the job in 2008 when London was frightened. We were frightened about what was happening to our economy. He put confidence back into London. He put London back on the map. But working with government is the first line in the job description of the mayor, and that is not something.
Caroline, it looks like we're going to get a Tory or a Labour mayor. Who would you say your supporters should vote on their second preference, that crucial part of the mayoral campaign that we don't see in other elections?
I'm not here to make the case for either of the candidates that you've heard this evening. I'm here for votes for the Liberal Democrats and for Caroline Pidgeon's London Liberal Democrats on the orange ballot paper to guarantee there's a strong presence of Liberal Democrats at City Hall. But, you know, we hear the same old thing from the main two candidates. We hear them time after time bickering away, not talking about the issues that matter for Londoners. I've 8 years' experience at City Hall. I've been working tirelessly for Londoners day in, day out for the last 8 years, and I will continue to do that to make sure London works for everyone.
And we can hear more about that in a minute.
Yes.
Peter Whittle,
Yes.
second preference, who would you recommend?
Absolutely not. I'm here as UKIP, and that's how you take me. The fact of the matter is that this campaign has shown that there's still a huge number of people who are undecided, which actually just shows the lack of inspiration that there is in these guys here.
Yeah,
and
Peter
I think
Whittle,
that
undecideds are key. Fact.
There's an awful lot
What
of
about the turnout, Sian Berry? Because that's
I
crucial,
hope
isn't it?
people really will turn out. There was the highest turnout in the mayoral election was when I last stood in 2008, actually. It was 45%, which is still very low, and I think people need to get registered and voting. Can I just say, in terms of Greens working with other parties in government, Greens on the London Assembly have a fantastic record of getting things out of mayors of all kinds. They had a casting vote over Ken Livingstone's budget for 4 years. They are the ones who got the living wage unit created. That's 60,000 Londoners with more money in their pockets as a result of Greens. And I, as a campaigner, I've worked and got things out of Labour governments, and I've got things out of Tory governments as a transport campaigner and as a campaigner for energy efficient boilers, actually. And I think I can work with, I know how the Treasury works, I know what kind of thing George Osborne needs to hear in order to say a policy is okay. They need the economic case making, and I can do that.
Sian Berry, and you've got plenty of time out of me as well. I must hand you over now to Nick Ferrari. Thank you very much, Nick.
Nina, thank you. And for the listeners and, of course, the viewers online, we now go more sort of free flow for a whole slew of questions. Hopefully, first up, Sean Mansour. Where are you, Sean? Is it Sean? Is it Sean? My apologies.
Shamim.
Which one's that?
Shamim.
Shamin, I do apologise. I need glasses. Shamin, go ahead with your question.
My question is on Brexit, specifically to Zac or Sadiq. It's a two-part question. What is the biggest financial advantage you see for the financial services sector should we go ahead with Brexit? And secondly, currently we have a number of EU immigrants working in the UK. Should we, again, Brexit materialise, how are you going to manage those people? Ship them off, or how is it going to happen?
And you want to go first to Sadiq Khan or Zac Goldsmith? Labour, Sadiq Khan.
I can go first, if you like.
We all have your opportunity, Mr Whittle. I'm sure you don't. I thought you'd be in there. We will come to you in a moment. Mr Khan.
I'm campaigning for us to remain in the European Union. More than 500,000 jobs in London are directly dependent on us being members of the European Union. 60% of the world's leading companies, think of Sony, AIG Insurance, have their EU headquarters here in London. And you're right, the financial services rely hugely on us being members of the European Union. A good example where I'll be campaigning with the Prime Minister for us to remain in the European Union.
Mr Goldsmith.
Thank you very much.
It's Shamin, by the way.
Thank you. On a personal level, as one of 48 million people or so who hopefully will take part in this referendum, I will be voting for Brexit. I'll be voting to come out because I don't think the offer we have goes far enough, and I think democracy matters. I think it's important.
Doesn't that put you at odds with the city?
I don't think so, but I think it matters that people who make decisions on our behalf should be susceptible to democratic pressure. It should be possible to get rid of them. I think that's a fundamentally important thing. But I have to tell you that as the mayoral candidate for the Conservative Party, my only focus, my only campaigning has to relate to trying to persuade more than half of Londoners to either give me their first or their second preference, because the biggest risk to London, I believe, is not building on what we've had over the last 8 years. years under Boris Johnson, not making it work for Londoners across the board. That's what I'm standing to do, and the job of the next mayor is not to take us out of Europe or to keep us in Europe, it is to make work whatever decision is made by the British people.
Mr. Whittle, from UKIP, you've done well to stay in your seat. You've been bouncing up and down.
I couldn't disagree more with actually what Zac says there, simply because, you know, we have a referendum coming up in June, just 6 weeks after this particular election. You cannot divide the two. This is an extraordinary decision we're going to make. In answer to your particular question about the city and services, the fact is I completely believe in being out of the EU. That's without question. That's what my party is about. But in terms of the services, when people said, and the city said, if we don't join the euro, that's it, we're finished. All the banks are going to go to Frankfurt, all the finance houses are going to go to Paris. It didn't happen. It was complete scaremongering. It won't happen this time. Sadiq is completely, that's a lie about the 500,000 jobs. He's taking that from some kind of figure which is just talking about trade we do with Europe. We will continue to do trade.
Thank you very much. We have time for any sentence.
Our city's success absolutely depends on us being at the heart of the European Union. It's unthinkable we could have a mayor of London who's anti that, and our public services would absolutely collapse if we didn't have people here from the European Union, being the nurses, being the doctors. And I wouldn't want to go to hospital in the UK where we didn't have the staff there to give me that medical care.
In a sentence, if you would.
Firmly for staying in, if Peter will let me carry on talking for a second. Never mind jobs. We have 100,000 households in London where UK citizens live with EU citizens. I'm not going to throw all of them into jeopardy as well. So
would be thrown into jeopardy.
We've discussed, we're discussing the May vote, not the June vote.
This is a total
Panel, thank you very much indeed. Panel, thank you. And I'm afraid, as always, we have run out of time. All that remains to say is thank you to the candidates and appreciation, please, for Sadiq Khan, Zac Goldsmith, Caroline Pidgeon, Peter Whittle and Sian Berry. They represented Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems, UKIP and the Green Party, respectively. And to our audience, let's hear it for them here at the Union Chapel in Islington. You can continue the debate online using the hashtag #LondonDebate. And the full reaction to the debate continues on LBC with Clive Bull. But from me, Nina Hossein, and all of the team here, and the great audience, thank you for tuning in, and good night.